I mean, but in a consumption, in a world in which you allow interdependence of preferences, you have a lot of norm-driven and competitive kinds of consumption. And in particular, the more inequality you get, the more of this type of consumption competition you tend to have. Veblen, of course, famously wrote about it, thinking about status competition. But even if we're not talking about status goods, let's say we're just talking about a basic process of keeping up with a rising norm. If you have an economic driver, say income, coming into your system, as from the process I was just talking to you about, you'll have this upscaling of norms so that that income is going to get spent. And what happens is you have a continual upscaling, no positional, you can have a model in which you have no positional change, so everybody's just as well off positionally as they were before, but when the norm is moving up, everybody has to keep up. Now, as it turns out, if you look at what's happened in the United States over the last couple of decades, people have kept up by working longer hours, by going into debt, by doing a lot of things that have then undermined well-being, eroded community, and had adverse effects on well-being because they're in that positional treadmill. Think about what the positional treadmill means from the point of view of the environment. It means that we are producing more and more and more, doing more and more ecological degradation just because we're on a positional treadmill. I mean, from a social point of view, it's deeply irrational, even though it's rational from the point of view of the individual. Classic example of a, kind of prisoner's dilemma market failure, but it's absolutely endemic. And the more you have a social model of consumption, the more pronounced this effect becomes. And what I would argue is in the contemporary period in which we have shifted to a very symbolically driven consumer society, and of course there's been tons written about that and what it means. It means that you get these competitions. And I'm just going to show you the way one of them has been working, and this is in apparel markets. Just been charting. This is not a status model so much as just a fast accumulation model. But what happens is when the social life of a good declines, so that's a norm upscaling, okay? So that the fashionability window shrinks, so you get to a kind of extreme or a fast fashion system. People begin accumulating and churning goods at more and more rapid rates, and that competition just keeps it going. So the average American went from, in 1991, purchasing about 33 pieces of new apparel per year, up to, we're just about up at 70 by 2005. And lest you want to make a standard neoclassical argument that says, well, this is fine, it's giving people lots of well-being, look at what they've been doing with it. Churning it right out, buying and discarding, buying and discarding. So we're in a rapid cycle of accumulation and discard, which is sort of the, it's like at the end of a boom. And I'm going to skip over the 2 slides that tell you about how it's happening in so many other goods, in furniture and glassware and sporting goods and et cetera, et cetera. So it's happening throughout the durable goods sector. Cell phones, another perfect example. Okay, let me conclude. Market outcomes can be profoundly dysfunctional, and I have identified 2 major markets, labor markets and goods markets, in which I would argue outcomes are dysfunctional, not because of small externalities, but because of basic features which have characterized this system since its inception. Second is relations between firms and employees, and that's that story of the labor market, relations among people and societies with inequality and discretionary consumption. I do want to say one thing, though, which is that it's not just about the market. And it may not be, even in some ways, primarily about the market. I think we have had a tendency to we're just talking, because this debate historically has been about market versus states, markets v. states. We've really, those are the categories that we've focused on. But I think to understand many of the problems of a quote-unquote free market mindset or free market system, you have to look at the underlying property distribution. because different property distributions yield different kinds of market outcomes. For reasons that have to do with the embeddedness of I mean, it's people and culture, and I mean, it's a longer story about why, but it's a really important point. It's not just about market exchange. Maybe if you want to think of the market much more broadly, or a capitalist market with high levels of inequality in distributions of property. But a lot of the problems that have developed in our economy have to do with the distributions of wealth and income and the growing skewness in those embedded in then a market. So it's not just the market. It's the market interacting with a particular distribution of property. And remember, these models of the market are all about lots of little agents, you know, all of whom are property holders. I mean, the property distributions are, or none of whom are, or it's completely unspecified, because it's not a category in the model, but it's really central to understanding it. If we want to solve the ecological problem, we've got to restructure control of nature. I don't want to talk about ownership. I don't believe in ownership of nature. If we were just talking about another economic asset, it would be. We need to think about labor markets and also property distributions to do something about this, you know, very fundamental output bias in the way the system works. Thank you.